toba cha di chedu mi che samu se nyambe kurun kunje ge jimba na leba se da de semba shu da kan semba chebe tambi che ge samde da kazin chanju lamri chimbe de ne o da ji hatung la lobju ge kadur wa da hatung ge chode ba se da sabji sum ani changde da nge de ge sura gong su ga ani gumbulu lu ge ne ji jam ge da ji rimba khande chunga ne di hola ne tela ba tawa ki bi ba sabje sum yoba nani 다 공부를 듣니 배지 장애 지수 지들 중화디 마드링 기 잠가진 데 항마디니 두스 마슈기스.
Please begin generating a clear motivation in your mind to listen to this teaching for the sake of being able to do whatever it takes to attain the complete and perfect state of full awakening of a Buddha, for the sake of all mother sentient beings who are infinite, like the sky, like space. And so make your mind, your motivation, and your mind very clear to listen for that purpose. And where we left off last time was in the section on the great insight, the section on insight, which is called the Great Insight. And here we had that section of the preliminaries or the preconditions for insight to be generated and 3 subdivisions within that. So there was the section on identifying the provisional and the definitive scriptures, and then the section on the lineage of this teaching on emptiness, and then the section on how to actually enter into reality. And I'm just going to read from the actual text because get the exact wording. So it's identifying scriptures of provisional and definitive meaning, 2, the history of commentary on Nagarjuna's intended meaning, and 3, how to determine the philosophical view of emptiness.
Oh, ducheta. Jinda dila da ka kazin dinda di sheshi di kawa khadu leris na dinda di o de ngarabi tini ji umabi tini ming dadang dilarwa tani dadang dila ani tani gi chöl kelin bi tini ming dasu chik ani twendam gi chöl kelin tu tini ming dasu ni nani tani gi kelin tu dila tini karire o do de jibu umabadang na jibu umaba sini ni sha 다 twendam gi tani kelin zongdo chewaina 아니 가서는 낭도 니속이 되는 데마도 있니 내 가리를 주말을 주바당 아니 나와 주반 넘바 집이 되는 데마도 바랍도 미니 바스다 디니 샤와딜라 아니 진짜 디 가리래다 병아라비디 샤와디 아니 진짜 로사와 룬데 샤랍기다 디 디기민도 우스다 디 가서는 아니 지오 되니 뭔가 아니 지 düzemme batını halleri şeye ngosabi tamre modoji kebala tapetinde kebatsedeki konga desudu mareesni sungan nangshin oda ti ani nangdoni sogi gumaru rubadan ani töban nabachibi gene rabdu miniba sede oda machiba de jermjigi kazin dinar sungan nangshin için tinda dinima ani tinda di günzendi da tinda tani joye günzendi usma logins.
And so we were in that second section there of the history of the lineage of Nagarjuna's explanation. And where we covered last week was that we discussed how there are these different terms that had arisen from former scholars, earlier than Tsongkhapa himself. And they had these different ways of labeling the different schools of Madhyamaka, of middle way thought. One of them was called the proponents of rationally established illusion, so there were 2 different ways that they had labeled and divided up the Madhyamaka scholars, both in terms of their differing views on conventional truth, and then also differing views on ultimate truth. So in terms of the different views on conventional truth, then they had the division of the Sautantrika Madhyamakas, who asserted external objects exist conventionally, and Yogacharya Madhyamakas, who assert that external objects do not exist conventionally. So that's in terms of their differing views on conventional truth. And in terms of differing views on ultimate truth, these earlier scholars had the way of dividing up Madhyamikas into these two groups of the proponents of rationally established illusion, who asserted that the composite, the dual, the composite of appearance and emptiness is an ultimate truth. And then the second group was the proponents of thorough non-abiding, who asserted that the mere elimination of elaborations with regard to appearances is an ultimate truth. So now we came just at the next paragraph. So here, this was page 115. And so Tsongkhapa explains, or he quotes, he references the Lotsawa Lodin Sherab, the translator Lodin Sherab, who said that that way of making the division is not okay. It's just like something that's interesting or seems something for kind of people who are not that knowledgeable, but the real, something here that says something to impress fools. So the real experts, the real educated scholars, they would not accept this way of distinguishing the Madhyamika scholars.
대다기 되바니스 리셰 제바기 샤위 튼점 튼음덴바 되바 나라 리셰기 샤자니 튼음덴바당 튠바 튼덤 시에 딱바 따바 우마진 당 우만나와 니가니 숨비시로 우마바 쳔보 시에 남장 리비 쩌바지비 튼 대점시 튼음덴바 미셰바 레바 마이노 스타든다 디가스나 다른데다 지름지기 가스나 엔다디 아니 낭동 니소기 되니 되담dem바 되겐기 규마를 주바 세제로와 티기 아니 되수들라다 미테바티다 가스나 로자올로는 시리 되게 말했어야 나신다 지금지 된다 디다다니 말이 군진디 가스나 대다기다 병하라바 대다기로와 리시 제바기 샤자 되담dem바 되바 나라다 낭동 니소 되담dem바 인인스고다 로와 리시 제바기다 고란족이다 지다 리시 제바스나다 지단 컨디지스고스나 된다 갑디 리시 제바디로와 돈이 또 리시 제바로와 답변은 가스나 돈이 주비지 바양달라 때니 부비자 또근기 세마지 오디라더니 제바 스캅디 리시 제바스면 되니지샤 로와 다디다 리시 제바 다지다 제바 세마당 무슨 세마세 남샤도조 하고와라 리시 제바 하고와라 리시 제바디 칸라 템베 다양다기 남샤도조 하고와라 대치도 다 다양다당 제바당 무슨 세마세 조고르조 아니 높전 주마 노수지 디고라 디시지 마잖아 다진다 디니마르와 다양다 주제양다라 때니 신다 딘데 고디 양선에서 되고리 대체도 아니 지 탄주바다 랑주비게지 시되어 랑주게 다다 신자기 다선 딘제기 남샤하고고도 다양다스나 하르 다다나스나 하르지 다리기 지비 조지르 티 아니 다리 다양다기 지비 조강라더니 수숨기 계자도 하고 그래서 다 수숨 창외더니 군세 나 군세 양다 수숨 마찬가지 군세 양다 말 딘제기 남샤지 십사오지 근데 맞추는 로브즈지 하마고는 다 디니마들은 디코르즈 rimba yandala tenesini da chidurala soba ta yanda ngasini keje thyoyongdu 디코르디 때지 다 코카부차기래 디치도 다 중말롭제 신다지라 한줄 람림에 바체 다부 다양다 거당 아니 로르기 다 무슨 세마다 제바 세마 거기 로스니 지시 슈기르와 어디 체인데 된다 값수 파와 대다기 되바 리시 제바기 샤비 튀는 데바 데바 나샤스나 낭동 니소디 나와스도 가리래 덴바 주와 나야 덴바 마주비 아니 장신들라 낭동 니소스 그래 다디 튀는 데마 말해 랑룰라 다 된다 병아랍에 뒤 튀는 데마 샤니 아니 돈이 또비 제바 루와 딘디 아니 가리래 와 데메 또비 리시 제바 디기 낭동 니소 또바 켈리니 딘데 낭동 니소디 튀는 데마 되디 아니 튀는 데마 친이 바리스는 지금 말해 스와 데바 리시 제바기 쉐위 된좀 튀는 데마 되바 낭라 오다 딘데 리시 제바기 쉐위 튀는 데마디 딘데 왜 값수 나라비 되기 아니 낭동 니소 어디 튀는 데마 레세디 튀는 데마 친이 바샤나 지금 말해 저름지게와 리시 제지 튀는 데마 아니 디 튀는 데마당 튜비 차네 튀는 데마스는 닝따와레스 모두 튀는 데마 운이바 말해스 낭동 니소스나 디리 덴도 주마다고 했으리 덴바 주와 나양 덴바 무주위 여바지어와 pena che tamje demba tuwa nang ngor tangarang zura demba tuwa nang wana shi demba tuwa revers na mares o di demba tuwa nang yang demba majuwi rangshin yinba tila ani ruwa nang don niso la dendong juma tabu ta di tunum demba mare ine tunum demba da tumba insa kola tunum demba jedunba ming tawa dendong juma dala kasina ko demba tuwa kabi chani lego wari moto chigi demba tuwa kazamgi nega ma insa tunum demba tsiniba chaguwa ma o ti 마인바디 아니 루와 우마제 로베 시바소게 루와 첸진 시바소게 우마제다 로베 까말시 우마 나위 값수 아니 고 된다마 따바 바레스 루와 아니 된다마 데마값이 차네 되는 되는 데마 밍따 바레 모두 되는 데마 친이바 마레스 숭샤스 오 디나시시니 우마바 디니 가리데 로베 시바소도 로베 까마시 마인비 우마바 셴게장 딘도 주마따부 낭도 니소디 아니 된담 데바 따바바레 신이 송샤마도 운에 바이 시기민도 마셰상 낭도 니소 주마르 주바 신이 샤야드 지기민도 제르미 주제 어떤 딘데스 송샤스
So reading on, this is now the last paragraph of that page 100, 115. And we're sort of in the, well, I'll just read it from the beginning. Broadly speaking, there were some Indian and Tibetan masters who claimed to be Madhyamikas who used this kind of terminology for dividing Madhyamikas. However, here I aim to establish only the systems of the great... so we went a little, we started down, but it's okay. Here I aim to establish only the systems of the great Madhyamikas who are followers of the master Nagarjuna, who could explain every subtle distinction. Moreover, the great translator Lodin Sherab makes an excellent point when he says that this presentation of two types of Madhyamikas, distinguished according to how they assert the ultimate, is simply something to impress fools. For those who make such a distinction seem to be claiming that for proponents of rationally established illusions such as Shantarakshita and Kamalashila, the mere object that is understood by an inferential reasoning consciousness is an ultimate truth, whereas both Shantarakshita's ornament for the middle way and Kamalashila's illumination of the middle way say that the object understood by a reasoning consciousness is designated ultimate due to its being concordant with an ultimate truth. Also, the other great Madhyamikas do not accept as an ultimate truth the mere object. Okay, so that part wasn't covered yet. So here we have this phrasing of, there's a couple terms that come up here. So again, we had those proponents of rationally established who asserted that the ultimate truth is this combination or the composite of appearance and emptiness. So the composite of appearance and emptiness is a term that's coming up here, as well as here we have this word, an inferential reasoning consciousness, or sometimes just called a reasoning consciousness. So a reasoning consciousness here really is referring to, especially in this context, is referring to a consciousness that relies on the reasoning to prove emptiness, and is a consciousness which realizes emptiness. So this is what's meant by reasoning consciousness, relies on a valid and flawless reason to realize emptiness. And so it's also, a type of inference. So it's an inferential reasoning consciousness. And now we talk about how this, we have all these different kind of terms that come up here, as well as later on in this text, in the section on insight, such as this kind of flawless reasoning, flawless sign. Sometimes we say valid sign, or reason, or proof, all these different terms that come up. Then we had, like last class, we discussed the difference between an autonomous reason and then with last class, it was the term that came up was consequential reasoning, but there's yet another term. So we have, I'm not actually sure how the text translates it, but how the translation here has it, but it's something like, maybe we could just say like renown, a reason by being renowned, or something like that, a reason of being renowned. I'm not sure how accurate that term is, but I don't actually know the English for that one. So anyway, so there's all these, but the point being though, Genlan was saying, so all these terms are coming up here, and actually we really need to explain them separately. So we're going to take one class and not go through the text of the Lamrim Chenmo of the Great Treatise, but we're going to just spend one class to discuss, give a basic overview of these different terms that come up in the courses in reasoning. So we have all these different types of reasons that come up in our insight, in a great insight text here, the reason of freedom from one and many, and the 5 other types of reasons that come up. But we don't, so if we don't know these terms and what they mean, and what a perfect or valid reason is, what a flawless sign is, what these autonomous syllogisms are, autonomous reasons, what the reasons of renown are, and if we don't, if we're not aware of all those things, then we won't really be able to understand what's coming up in the text. So we're going to spend a class to go over what it is basically kind of the you could say the science of logic, or you could say maybe like meta logic, and then psychology as it's understood. So that's the takrik and lorik. So those are the Tibetan phrases you may have heard, tarik and lorik. So we'll spend a class to go over those. Okay, so anyway, going back to the text here. Oh, and then that's where we also go over the distinction between inferential valid cognizer as well as direct valid cognizer, and you'll see how for something to be a valid sign, it has to fulfill these 3 characteristics of being a valid sign, the three methods for proving something, or the 3 ways of proving something. And if some sign or reason doesn't fulfill those 3 ways of proving something, then it's not a valid or flawless reason. So we'll go over those things. Okay, going back to the text. So we have here this idea of a composite of appearance and emptiness. So what does that mean? Well, it's the basic idea is that although things appear to be truly existent, truly established, they're not truly established. So there's the appearance of being truly established, but the emptiness, they're not truly established. So there's this composite of the appearance and emptiness. And so so there's another phrase that we use for the same thing, which is empty of truth like an illusion. So that's a phrase that will come up again and again. Empty of truth like an illusion. Empty of truth like an illusion. So that also is the same thing as meaning the composite of appearance and emptiness. Those 2 mean the same thing. So now, with the point that Tsongkhapa is making here, though, and I kind of veers a little bit from the way it's translated here, but it's still actually that's okay. But it's the Tibetan can kind of, the meaning comes through, but what is being said is that it's not okay to assert this as ultimate truth, because it's not the pure negation of the object to be negated. So that's what emptiness means, or ultimate truth is the pure negation of the object to be negated. Yet here, when we talk about the composite of appearance and emptiness, there's an aspect of negating true existence. There's an aspect of negating negating true existence. So that's why Kamalashila and Shantarakshita, they're comfortable referring to it, they're able to refer to it as a designated ultimate, but not as an actual ultimate. So here, that's what Tsongkhapa is sort of agreeing with. Yes, we can call it a designated ultimate because it has some aspect of negating true existence, but it's not the pure negation of pure negation of true existence. So that's why it's not an actual ultimate truth. So
도체 다든다 디코도로 연제 제시지 바 세가 쉐지랑스나 다든다 되놈 데마들라와 유 되놈 데마다 유전 되놈 데마스 니 제시 장고를 와다 우마비불라와 유 되놈 데마들라 다 덴룹 가좀기 메가들라 유 되놈 데마 운에당 운에 바체 아니 데바 두와 나야 데바 마주비 여바지라 데라 유 되놈 데마 제든 바스니 남주 되는 수고 다 유진라야 되니 로 토연담바 운에 바다 로 토연담바 제든 바 니셔고 다 덴바 두와 가점기 메가 무슨도 또비 로버포게 님샤이셰들라 아니 로 된them 데마 응외치 와 다 덴동 주마다부 또비 리시 제바들라 아니 로 된다 봐 지든 봐서 딘데게 타녔다고 와 디체연데 다 된다디 가스나 덴동 주마다부 세저와 덴동 주마다부 또 발라 또니 또 봉도 더 저거래 덴바 두와 덴바 마주와 하마고와 덴바 주바 나양 덴바 마주비 여바디 하고 두어 와 이바디 가스나 그 배는 밖에 시들을 출연지 주네 반에 사자 밖에 타바 타다들 주 노인데 대 주민도 삼배 삼로 당부 주 매바 하마고와 아니 주 나양 주 매바 세제 어떻게 삼로디 타주 두고 말와 그 인도선에 당부 뒤주 많이 봐 하고니 되는 신이 어 다기가 주 나나양 뒤 주민도 와서 삼로디 제라 깨와와 뒤낭신신 아니 덴바 마주와 돈이 되냐라 하고니 아니 최 감배지 덴바 주와 나야 어다디 덴바 주와 나야 덴바 주비 동화 인다 somebody 로라 또에디 제라레고 디 제연데 다디 또발라 돈이 또 비시 제바 니라 고월 다디 제연데 리시 제바 디기 아니 돈이 또발레 세지다 덴노 주마 따부 또발레 신지 니레인데 다 딘다 돈이 또 비시 제바 디기 덴노 주마 따부 또바디 장루라 켈링고 지름지 공고 말디 탄주빌루라디 말이 다 된다 네 병아랍이 나라 지시 자다야 벽이 다 개방감마든 게 지시를 높아드니 잡여서 다디 제름지기 되니 디 태기민도 서로 주마를 주비 안 우마 샤야디 아니 낭도 니소 안 되는 데마 켈링이 주마를 주발라면 지기민도 우마발라 낭도 니소 되는 데마 되게 요 말에 제름지기다 가바제 쪼디 디도니 아니 디인상 아니 낭도 니소 되는 데마 되게 아니 주마를 주고 우마바 세지 요 말이 뭐 지단 주마를 주고 우마지 요리 가스나 덴바주와 나야 덴바마 주고 장신세 근데 윤상 아니 덴바마 주고 내고래 스네 어떤데 켈린이다 덴바마 주고 주마를 주고 세지 우마바다 켈 지단 켈린 거래 이나야 병아랍이 샤와 나신기 주마를 주바와 우마바다 켈밀린 바 어다 되게 쉽게 대응 말아서 근데 디카둘라 하고 고에디 티니지레스
So then to continue explaining this point, we can also make a distinction between the ultimate object as well as an ultimate subject. So then we had the so we can talk about ultimate object as well as an ultimate subject, and so the pure negation, the pure negative, which is negation of true establishment, that is the ultimate object, or the that's fine, the ultimate object. And then the ultimate subject, we can talk about, that's when we talk about that, that's where this term, the composite of appearance and emptiness, comes in. So the composite of appearance and emptiness is really referring more to the referring to the ultimate subject. And you have, even within this ultimate subject, the actual ultimate subject, and then, or the genuine ultimate subject, and then you can say maybe just a labeled ultimate subject, just a labeled ultimate subject, or kind of a similar one that's similar to it. Sorry, I can't think of a better word than that. So anyway, you have the actual ultimate subject is the direct valid perceiver, which is in meditative equipoise on emptiness. So that's a consciousness directly realizing the emptiness, or emptiness of true establishment. And then the labeled ultimate subject is this reasoning consciousness that realizes emptiness. So it's this inferential consciousness, inferential reasoning consciousness. And so here, when you look at how, and so we're going back to this thing of, this idea of whether or not, a composite of appearance and emptiness can be posited as ultimate truth. And so what you see is that it doesn't Tsongkhapa is saying, it doesn't make sense to posit that as ultimate truth, because you have, when you have, you're a mind, or person, or a mind that's confused about the nature of phenomena and whatever kind of object, whatever kind of basis of our minds interacting that you can think about. If you look at that thing and you're confused about its nature, because you have this appearance, a confused appearance that it's truly existent, then you have to, so that's the what is meant by the word the appearance, when we have this union of appearance and this composite of appearance and emptiness. Then you have to first realize that the object is empty of true existence, that it doesn't exist as it appears. So that's like an example of that, is that when you have some rope that you have the appearance of, it appears to your mind as being a snake, and so you have this confused appearance, right? Some kind of almost hallucination. So a confused appearance of a rope as a snake, for someone whom is experiencing that, has that appearance in their mind, they don't see that and go, oh, there's this composite of appearing to be a snake but really being a rope, but really not being a snake. First, you have to have the knowledge, the ascertainment that it's in fact not a snake. You have to first have that realization that it's not a snake. Then when it appears as a snake, you can go, oh, it appears to be a snake, but really it's not. So likewise, whatever kind of object you're thinking about, any phenomenon, any object at all, you have to be able to first realize that it's empty of true establishment. And then when it appears, then you can say, then you can understand, oh, it appears to be truly existent, but in reality, it's not truly existent. So the problem here is that, the composite of appearance and emptiness isn't the ultimate truth, because you have to realize that ultimate truth first before this composite happens, where you have things appearing to be empty, but knowing that they're actually, things appearing to be true, but knowing that they're actually empty of true existence. So, in general, yes, it's okay to, in general, think about, the Madhyamaka philosophers as, kind of being, what's the phrase here again? The proponents of rationally established illusion. In general, you can, use that term to refer to Madhyamikas, because yes, they do use reasoning, they use reasoning to establish that, there's that phenomena appear to be truly existent, but in reality are not truly existent. So that is something that Madhyamikas accept. However, the way that it's being talked about here by these earlier scholars, that the union of the composite of appearance and emptiness is itself ultimate truth, that is not appropriate, and it's not, because it's not accepted by any Madhyamaka scholar. So there's no Madhyamaka treatise or text where it describes ultimate truth in this way. So that is why that's not acceptable, even though in general, yes, Madhyamikas accept that basic principle that there is this composite of appearance and emptiness. They don't accept that that is ultimate truth.
Oda diwala dila lubin shidi naris lubin papa yapsigi umi tenju zebali chidun yumi suru sawa mazelas ti hodo lubin lindenjigi namba rikbasang luk sunjungde tanyedu chidun yubi luk namba shagos dadinda di karsung warasana dadinda churimdilarwa da kumbul lujugi dini umi dawa dinda tonigi dawa tela pabi jesu umabigi daji 방임신의 중화로 왔다. 이 중림들아 루빈 이시디 나리 생디 갈송셨으나 루빈 파바 yap세 수도 루빈 파바 yap세 수도 다 공부루당 아니 루빈 파바라니들아 루빈 파바 yap세스 거래로 그래서 공부루주 다 오마비 따와 되니 수요 책임이 되니 디 송상 아니 야 아니 디 제수 장경기 로미기 다디 되니 루빈 파바라로 어떤 고난이라 되니 루베 yap세서 다 되게 되니 슝가리래 고물루주기 되니 가리래 우미 아니는 슝 우마를 소투 세디세 바로와 다 루베 파발라기 되니 루베 아이다로 루베 파발라기 아니 가리래 시야바 우미 딘딘 시켜봐 세디 제바와 오다 딘족이 흉디 나라 치든 여바다 맵이 세가 면도 있습니다. 딘디습니다. 제시직 자와리 로비시디기 와 치든 여르세 세가 면도 메르스 세가 면도 디오도 딘 로빌리 내지기로와 아니 넘버직 받은 루 순중됐습니다. 남 셈zam비 루디 딘이 깡네 아니 셈zam비 다 치든 아니 매바 되고 랑 셰발리 제신비 치르고 숙소지 요 말했어. 최담지 심기 단위점도 두바래 스니 켈링게 심자마로와 오다 심자비 되바들아 가바점미로와 오다 심자비 디 넘버리 버튼 디주도 지기민도 진짜 타니도 랑 셈레 심비로와 아니 신로와 치르고 숙소 아니 치르고 된 요래 스니마다 딘디 싸와 되샤 슬로벨인데 지금 어디지도 다든다 디가 돌아 치도에서 이게 지다 되용거리 치르준도 주바세야 되라와 치라마와 도대박에 치든 지켜는 거. 로벨링데 지다 도대체 우마랑 주비 치든 지켜는 거. 탄주비 치든 지켜는 거. 다 치든 켜는 뭐 찍바르데 다 디킬린 줄 민다와 차와. 치라마다 도대베 가서 치든데 나 셰발레 제신비 치르고 수 두제 참여서 라바지. 딘디지 되비 전에 치든 켜는 봐 스틸. 다 로벨링데 지기 다 치라마도 되바 난신기 두제 참여서 라바디 말데 그래서 두 차랍 사비 아니 나 들어와 숙소 나 셰발레 제 셰바지 켈레만상 아니 치도연세들이 치료도 들어봤어 나 셰발레 치료비 되는 숙소 다음 탄주비 아니 대회장들 미다와 차와를 가서는 나 셰발레 제 셰바 켈레는 거나 셰발레 뭐 타디비 또비 따서 수지 켈레는 거에서 아니 치도연세들이 왔다 뒤차와를 어디 제인도 다 진짜 대 로빈 시대기 가서는 공부를 당 너네 파발하게 흉나라 치료 유미 세가 민도 세디 다디다다 되고 말이야. 와디 하나 된다디 노와디 가서는 이바도 공부를 우마리 이제 채워나라와 가서는 좀 된되게 되니 두자 삼발라 뛰니 가시라 치료 여바수 말 가시라 치료 매바수 말했으니와 카질라니 니베네 카질라니 니데 봤으니와 아니 사무 쿠지진도 돈니진이 보지 무슨 디지도 다좀 된되게 최순수이고네 아니 지 강사 가실라더니 지도 여바숭 강사 가실라 지도 매바숭 가실라더니 돈이게 따와숭 어딘데 숭말해 습니다 지도 유미기 세가디 공부를 두게 된 우마리 이제 정원은 제어래 이는 나 디노라 마체 스레지도 디 제르미스나 디팅 마레스는 숭하래 다 디오도 로벨 인덴지기 넘버리 받은 루 순주데 단위도 지도 루 넘버샤고 수다 디 중름디 지고 다 공부를 두게 달로 봐봐 옆세기 제라 아니 디가서 로벨 산제장 디제라드니 로벨 인디지 배워라 다 로벨 인디지기 되니 셈셈 루디 까와니 아니 지도여 봐 아니 로벨 산제장을 가봐 잡니 되니 단주 밑에 어랑주 티기지 무슨 줍제지 때 말와 어저 방림디디 독순이래스
우마랑 규백이 치든 켈렌바디 연결직 손타
우마랑
낭셰바
로벨인디지 이거 낭셰발레 제시비 아니 수지 두차랍다 제라마도 되베 두제 참여서 비라바지로 왔는데 로벨인디지기 두제 참여서 비라바디 요 말했어 두 참여 요 말이 시tum로 차지에 미쳐버렸어 이네 두 차랍 두비더니 낭셰발레 제시비 숙소지 요래 그래서 지도 요래 그래서 된대지 민다와 때지
이 라괴고 마연벨로 그래
라바 지도인데 라바래
라괴에서
차랍 사비 라바 이네 디 참여서 비라바 말했어
Let's. Right. So then we'll read the next few sentences. Also, the other great Madhyamikas do not accept as an ultimate truth the mere object that is arrived at when reason eliminates elaborations with regard to an appearance. Therefore, this division is not a good approach. As to the history of commentary on Nagarjuna's thought, the master Geshe explains that the masters, the noble Nagarjuna and his spiritual son Aryadeva, did not make clear in their Madhyamika treatises whether external objects exist. Later, the master Bhava Viveka refuted the system of Vijñapti Matra and presented a system in which external objects exist conventionally. Then the master Shantarakshita set forth a different Madhyamika system that teaches, based on Yogacharya texts, that external objects do not exist conventionally, It also teaches that the mind ultimately lacks intrinsic existence. Thus, two forms of Madhyamaka arose, the former called Sautrantika Madhyamaka and the latter Yogacarya Madhyamaka. So, then we have this kind of history coming here, right, of which scholars came after Nagarjuna. And so, first of all, here it does have in the English translation in the brackets there, even though the brackets, that means so it's added to the, the original text doesn't actually have the names, but you have the kind of, actually the phrasing in the Tibetan is the father and son. So the father and son is referring to Nagarjuna and then Aryadeva, so the guardian Nagarjuna and the Aryadeva, and the master Aryadeva. And so then you first have this kind of, series of, masters who are, asserting different kind of points about the conventional truth and whether or not external objects exist. So this is where you have and so the texts that were composed by those two, father and son, were once again by the guardian Nagarjuna is the 6 texts of reasoning, and by Aryadeva, a text called the 400 stanzas on emptiness, or just often called the 400. So those are, or the Madhyamaka 400, you could say. So the Madhyamaka 400 were, in those texts, were the basis for what all the other scholars commented on and made their treatises about. And so what Geshe said is that it wasn't clear in those texts whether or not external objects exist, whether or not external reality exists. So then later scholars that came had differing perspectives on that. And so first you had the view of Bhava Viveka, who claimed and asserted that external objects do exist. So he refuted the mind-only school, the Chittamatra school, and asserted that external objects, phenomena which are of a different substance from consciousness do exist. So this is, if you kind of look at the these 4 different paradigms, which were brought up previously. So there's the Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka. So these 4 paradigms in Buddhist philosophy, 3 of them do assert that external objects exist. And then, well, you have again 2 different Madhyamaka schools. So within the Madhyamaka, you have those that assert that they exist and those that assert that they don't. So when putting aside the Yogacarya, when we look at for instance, so if we're looking at those schools where they do assert that external phenomena exist, external world exists, then there's different ways of asserting it. So the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, their way of asserting external objects is that they're actually these, coarse substances which are composed of partless atoms, or what we can call point particles, or partless atoms. And so that is the view of the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika. Then what is the way that so within the Madhyamaka, there are 2 different camps, paradigms, who assert external objects. There's this, branch of the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, which is called the sutra, what was it phrased here again? Sautrantika Madhyamaka. So we can call it the Sautrantika Madhyamaka. They assert that there are external objects that are a different substance from the mind, that are different from the mind, but they're not composed of partless atoms. They're not composed of point particles, because if something is a phenomenon, it's necessarily composed of parts. So there is no partless phenomenon, partless object. So they assert that, yes, there's the coarse external objects that are different substance from the mind, but they are not, and they are composed of atoms, but they're not composed of partless atoms. They're composed of subtle atoms that are not partless atoms. Then you have the Prasangika Madhyamaka position, right? The consequentialist middle way school. So the Prasangika Madhyamaka also accepts external objects exist, external reality, and their way of accepting it is that there's that Tagirwe Lula any non sheba lingo tadebe chiden years. Tobe tapsangi chiden years. Okay. So there any dually drupa yida megi kitchetina. Dually drupa killing mara. So there the Prasangika Madhyamaka assert that there are external phenomena that are a different nature from the internal consciousness, from consciousness, but they're merely posited or merely designated by conceptuality. They're phenomena, they're external objects that are merely designated by conceptuality, and they're not composed of atoms. So that's the different ways of positing external objects. And then you have Baba Viveka, who gave the presentation that external phenomena do exist. And so what Tsongkhapa is saying is that this basic history or the stages of commentary on Nagarjuna and Aryadeva's text, that is accurate the way that Geshe explains it. But the point that he's making about that Geshe made, that Nagarjuna and Aryadeva didn't make clear whether external objects exist, actually isn't true. That's not correct, because Nagarjuna's text called the Ratnavali, or the Ratnavali is the Garland, Precious Garland. Precious Garland. So the Precious Garland, he does actually have a verse there, a section there, where he explains that the Buddha himself, because of the different needs of different disciples, gave these different explanations, where sometimes he said that external phenomena exist, and other times he said external phenomena don't exist. So Nagarjuna does explain in this text, the Precious Garland, about the situation of external objects. So that's not actually correct what Geshe says there, although the history and the basic stages of commentary, that is all correct. That's all.
Oh yeah, that do it. Oh, then we shiva zu nanju jubu shungla dene tanye do chiru meba tangs tuyandamba semrang shimeba dumbi umi chul minjawa shik zebe umaba namba nisu chungshin ngamala do de jubu umaba shieba tang chimala nanju jubu umaba shie dasu shie chebani chungrimba dedar ngunu ustatinda digasna di wala dagi lobelinde jiga wala dar lobe shiva zu 단 남주주부 슝라테네스 심자미 단얘기 남샤디 심자마당 팀비고는 치료된도 봐 요 말했어. 봐. 어떤 치료된도 봐 매비 되니 진대비 단얘기 남샤 아니 제경기로 왔다 되는담바랑 신기 마두징 치료 아니 매바 맛에 되는담바랑 신 매비 남샤 뚱얘기 tindewe lobi shiwa tsugu lugdi ma sawa de marwa ta tila nanchu jubu umabas dukshin da dodo jubu umabas di lobi lindeje la dodo jubu umabaran she an nanchu chima dine lobi shiwa tsula nanchu jubu umabas she dasu she ta dindesini she chunga rimba dar nguyena sidi da jerumji kar sungusina ta lobi lindeje ki dodo jubu umagi dine chidyo yubi dine diyan rwa chudumje rang demba 마루 징 치료비 남샤 제게 도대체 봐 아니 치료 마루 되다 말랑시 마루 신나주지고 우마바스니 세가니 방림지도와 로벨린데지도 우마랑주비 신다 수제야 이스고 아니 도대체 우마랑주비 신다 수제야 이스 단 로벨 시와소디 아니 나주지고 우마랑주비 신다 수제 이스 그래서니 랑주발라 도대체부 우마랑주바다 나주지부 우마랑주바 니 독수는 중앙 오다 딜라도 치료 케레 받으라 도대체바 치료 케메르메라 우마 나주지바바 하스니보다 디 다녀샤바디다 디고 말이 로아지당 로벨린데지 도대체부 우마랑주바 라야당 나주지 로벨 시바즈도 나주지부 우마랑주바 라야도 디고 이나 로벨 시대기 공부지도 치료 요바 켈링엔들라 우마바들라 도대체바 Chidun meba chelling umabadla nanjuchuba sedi, miti wasna, panden dawa chabada. Lobe Sanyaja Kunzoyan, Chidun Chelibu Umabarba. In a Dudujubu Umara Umabalaki Mares. Dudujubu Umaba Sedi, Umabeg Tawa Kelim Bitindu, Tanigi Namsha, Shi Namshadi, and Dudubu Nashima, Kelemainza, Dudujubu Umaba. Tichidan Dindochi. Lubi Shitiki Timasuachi. Umabaladini Chidun Yoba Chelling at the Megan Kelly, Ni Kazunchini. In the Pungarabe, Shai Rauji Sinua, or that 티 치든 켈리부 우마바다 치든 켈미르부 우마바니라 도대주바바 난주주바 세디 지고 말이와 지당 도대주부 우마바 세디 로벨인데지 도대주부 우마바 로벨 시바주리 난주주부 우마바 다디 된다디 가르스나 우마바 세디 지당 다 우마바 세디 가스나 덴바 주비 취 뒤자에 매진 자직이 남샤 대바 켈리베전이 우마바 세디체 다 우마바들라더니 우마 탄주바다 우마 랑주바스니 되니 공부루주기 아니 가스나 교연담바 덴바 주바 매와 마세 랑싱기 주바야 요 말이 있으니 바 카스로 땅와 인상 아니 다디 말이 우마 베납샤 정인데 공부루주체 다 공부루주기 제라더니 로베 산지 장기로와 아니 교연담바 매와 마세 랑싱기 주바야 요 말이 있으니 탄주비 남샤디 마세와 되면서 탄주비 남샤세디 로베 산지 장기죠 다 오늘 로벨 인데지기 오 교연담바 덴바 주바 요 말데 랑싱기 주바 요래 덴바 마주징 랑싱 주바 요레 스미 켈링들라 우마랑 주바지 다 된다도 단주바다 랑주바니기 아니 켈린디 덴바마 주바 켈린바 직바지 다 랑싱 주바 유메 켈린바 니시 다른 덴바 마주징 랑싱 주바 켈링게 우마랑 주바들라야 나세기 니 치든 켈링게 도디주고 우마랑 주바로 벨리데지다 아니 넌 이거 치든 켈만게 아니 로베 시바조 나주주고 뭐바 니스 두스 난색 예와 중림들이레스 어디 디우스인다디 뇌양 인다디로와 다수 중림 대달고양서 중림 나가는 레스로와 고물루 디젤라 파범 아니 로베 파발라디니 디젤라디니 달로벨인데 지금 슝티 로벨인데 제라디니 로베 시바조 슝 제수디 중화림바 다르데 이네 민 다수디 치도 켈리브 우마바들라 도대체 바바세 당난 치든 케미는 우마바드라 난주 제바와세 미지비 그제 오다 독신진다디 호라 되도스
So thus the two forms of Madhyamaka arose. The former is called Sautantrika Madhyamaka and the latter Yogacharya Madhyamaka. It is evident that the sequence of events as explained by Geshe is correct. So then we had this basic way of understanding the, these different kinds of Madhyamaka philosophers that came from. So first, again, we have the perspective called the Yogacharya, being called the Yogacharya Madhyamaka, that was started by the master Shantarakshita. And so in his take, on his way of commenting on Nagarjuna's text, he says that there's this, his way of presenting the conventional truth is in line, it aligns with the Yogacharya, or the mind only, the Chittamatra, also called Yogacharya school. And so that's why he accepts, so within phenomena not ultimately existing, but there's no ultimately existing nature of things, that conventionally that his perspective is in line with the Yogacharya and that external phenomena don't exist. And so then all of these different scholars accept that all phenomena aren't ultimately established or do not ultimately exist, but then again they have different views of the external objects, so that the Bhavaviveka is the one who asserts that external objects do exist. Chandrarakshita asserts that they don't exist. So Bhavaviveka's position here is being called the Sautrantika Madhyamaka, because his position about conventional truth is in line with the Sautrantika paradigm. Now we call Bhavaviveka, he's said to be the trailblazer, or you can say the founder. So kind of here that term fits just as well, but it's the same Tibetan term. So you can call him the founder of the Sautrantika Madhyamaka school. you also can call him the founder of the Svatantrika Madhyamaka school. The Svatantrika Madhyamaka, again, has these two branches in it. The Svat, that's when you're distinguishing Svatantrika from Prasangika. So that's the autonomy school. So he's the founder of the Svatantrika autonomy Madhyamaka school. He's also the founder of the autonomy middle way school. Then he came before Shantarakshita. Shantarakshita, so he's also in this Svatantrika paradigm, the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, but so he's the founder of the Yogacharya Svatantrika Madhyamaka, Shantarakshita. So then this way of explaining the difference between the two Madhyamaka schools in terms of their understandings of conventional truths and whether or not the convention. So here it says, so in the next sentence, actually, it says, well, yeah, here it's here too. So he's talking about whether external objects exist conventionally. Then the next sentence says, however, while the master Chandakirti does assert that external objects exist conventionally, he does not do so in a manner congruent with the claims of other tenet systems. Thus, it is unsuitable to call him a Satantrika Madhyamaka. Similarly, the claim that he is in accord with the Vaibhashikas is also very unreasonable. So here, what Tsongkhapa is saying is that it's actually not appropriate to make this distinction of Satantrika Madhyamaka and Yogacharya Madhyamaka and say that all Madhyamakas fall into these two categories, because we have the master Chandakirti as well as Buddha Palita, who are Madhyamakas, but they do not accept, their understanding or positions with regard to conventional truth are in line with neither the Satantrika nor the Yogacharya schools. So you can't group them into either of these two. So then instead what we have is this, so in general, again, we have that all Madhyamakas accept, so there's a different way of making the distinction. So all Madhyamakas accept that there's not even an atom of ultimately existing or truly existing phenomena, yet conventionally phenomena function and there is, agent and action. So that's what all Madhyamakas accept. Then you have within the Madhyamakas what the distinction, the major distinction really is, there are a difference between those who accept, and so you had Nagarjuna giving this, main commentary on the Prajnaparamita literature, the main middle way text coming from Nagarjuna, and then Buddha Palita was the one who first made the clear explanation in his commentaries that not only do phenomena not ultimately exist, not only do they not truly exist, but they also don't inherently exist. So phenomena are not inherently established. So that's really where we have the distinction. The main distinction with Madhyamakas is between those who accept that phenomena do not inherently exist versus those who accept that phenomena do inherently exist. And so within those who accept that phenomena do inherently exist, then you have then you have these two of those who are, in line with the Satantrika and those who are in line with the Yogacharya. So again, just to be clear, that Buddha Palita and Master Chandakirti, they do accept the existence of external phenomena. It's just that they don't accept it in the same way that, and it's not, their view isn't in line with the Satantrika Madhyamaka. They do not accept inherent, because they do not accept inherent existence. So we have again, all Madhyamakas accept that phenomena do not truly exist, but then we can distinguish between those who accept whether or not phenomena inherently exist. And then again, another way of saying that is exist with a nature. So within those who accept that phenomena do exist with a nature, then you have those who accept that external objects exist and those who do not accept that external objects exist. And so later, these again will make it clear about this distinction.
디신도 제자 마와다 튠바 되바라는 신도 미릭소 스타트인다 디가슨스나 인다 치도인 켈레바다 밀레비 온도 전에 도드주바다 나주주바 세지도 딜람나 아니 반는 다와 타바데 치도인 켈레바 인상 도드주바라와 디dig마레스 미디왕스나 아니 루벤 반는 다바타 안데 가스나 공기다 줍디기 남샤디 강가 아니 줍다 시 아니 도대바다 제라모 수간제 무든바 랑게 친이 마주바 시제기 때문에 다와 때라 페바 장장 송장 딘데기 다와 때라 페 온도 제와인상 아니 도대체바스 민디 자롱 말에 탄얘기 남샤 도대바다 튕고 말했어 가스는 랑게 친이 도대바다 로벨인데지디 도대체바스디 로벨인데지당 도대바니 랑게 친이 주바 체레바 투바르와 랑게 친이 주바 체레비 땡네 아니 치료에 받쳐내면서 도대체바 아스케지시로와 다 반년 다와 잡아 라소베 탄주비 개발도 치료 체레 바르데 이내 도대체바 라 무르와 하스나 그 단얘기 남샤 랑게 친이 마주바 시시기 때문에 때라 받고 그랬어 뒤인상 아니 도대체바스는 지금 말했어 근데 다나시 아니 제라마와다 가서는 튜바 가려서는 제라마위 랑리 켈린 거 말, 로베 반년 다와 잡이야 랑리 켈린 거 말. 이내 제라마와다 튜바는 지금 말했어. 가서는 뭐랑게 제라마와다 고무디 말랑게 친님 마주바 시지게 땡네 되니로와 다도르수도나 제라마와다 튜미 단위 남샤 요 말에 아니 도대바다 튜바면서 아니 가서는 도대체바다 세다 제라마와다 튜바스는 지금 말했어. 어디시엔데 다 반년 다와 잡아 이게 가서는 공부 제수디 아니 랑게 친이 마주바 시제기 때문에 최점지 정신이 마주바 랑게 친이 마주바 시제기 때문에 아니 지부집이 차왔다 때문에 자제라서 봐 되게 랑게 친이 좀나다 되게 말했어요. 단얘기 넘샤 아니 제라마다 도대보다 퉁고만 이내야 된다 뒤 도바디 가능성 내고 왔으면 다 얘기 로벨인데지라 도주지부 우마와 라인데 아니 반에다와 잡아대야 되는 시도에 체를 받지 바로와 도대바 주부 우마랑 주바르슨 도주지부 우마랑 지기르었으면 지금 말했어. 가스나 고랑게 친님 마주바 시지기 때문에 다왔대라 보고 이제 단얘기 넘샤디 어디지 다 제라마와다 가리 튕고래 시도에 체를 받아 정리 케미네 바 제라마와 튕고래 제라마와 생들 주다디 아니 가스나 시도에 체 레싱 정리 케미네 비 팅미 부담을 강사 팅미 부담을 강사들라 제라마와 나와라 인도다 딜라드다 제라마와다 퉁고도 있으면 사물레인데 제라마와다 퉁고 말이 가서는 제라마에 되는 단얘기 넘셔야 돼. 랑게 친이 두바 시지게 되는 계는 거래. 반내 다와 잡아기 랑게 친이 마주바 시지게 되는 다와때라 보고 인상 아니 랑리 케밀레신 치도 켈레바 있는 제라마와다 투바 요 말이스. 어디 뒤준인데 독시인데 다 나 디젤라 슈쇼란 제라마와다 도드비다 디둑다 고대양 직 슈어 삼소로야.
So again, we'll just read that last couple sentences. However, while the master Chandakirti does assert that external objects exist conventionally, he does not do so in a manner congruent with the claims of other tenet systems. Thus, it is unsuitable to call him a Sautrantika Madhyamaka. Similarly, the claim that he is in accord with the Vaibhashikas is also very unreasonable. So again, we had this way of dividing up Madhyamakas into the Sautrantika Madhyamakas and the Yogacharya Madhyamakas. So then the question comes of, well, where do you place the master Chandakirti, if this is a valid distinction? And so the difficulty here is that Chandakirti he asserts that phenomena are not inherently established. They are not established by way of their own character. So, or by way of their own definition. So when you have the idea that, well, Sautrantika Madhyamakas like Bhava Viveka are those who assert, Madhyamakas who assert that external objects exist, then that must mean that they're Sautrantika Madhyamaka. So here the difference between him and Chandakirti is that Bhava Viveka asserts that external objects exist by way of their own character, by way of their own definition. They exist as, the Tibetan term is rangtsen. So rangtsen is a little bit tricky to translate, but I'll do my best. Unfortunately, the term again is not actually right here in this section, but I'm sure it will come up later and find the right term that's used in the translation. But anyway, they Bhava Viveka. A lesser. So then the meaning of existing by way of its own definition is that it's an existent thing which isn't existing merely by being designated by conceptuality. It's not merely designated by conceptuality. That's what it means to have to exist by its own definition or its own character. So, so whatever the term is, that's what it means. So you have these, again, different schools who assert that external objects exist, and in these different scholars. So Chandakirti does assert external objects exist, but he doesn't do it like Bhava Viveka. So you can't call him a Sautantrika, Madhyamika. It's also his view of conventional truths is not exactly like the Vaibhashika. The Vaibhashika, they do have similarity in that both of those schools, the Prasangika Madhyamika as well as the Vaibhashika, they both do assert that external phenomena exist. They also both assert that there is no such thing as what's called, self-cognizer. That's, I guess, one of the terms for it. So there's no, they both negate the existence of self-cognition or self-cognizers. But again, the way that Chandakirti accepts the existence of external phenomena is that he asserts external phenomena from within the understanding that they do not have their own character, that they are not established by way of their own character. Whereas the Vaibhashika assert external objects from within a perspective that they do have their own character. They're established by way of their own character. So that's a big difference. So you can't say that Chandakirti is like the Vaibhashika. So the definition of a Vaibhashika itself is, a person who is a philosophically inclined person who, or I guess you could say a proponent, a person who has a philosophy of the Hinayana philosophical paradigms, who does not accept the existence of self-cognition, but does accept the existence of external objects. So that's the basic meaning of someone who is a Vaibhashika. And so that's, so that is similar to Chandakirti, except Chandakirti accepts those things from within within a place of not accepting that phenomena are established by way of their own character. So similarly, you can't say that he is like the Sautantrika, because just like Bhava Viveka does, he accepts the position of external objects that's similar to the Sautantrika, because he accepts, just like the Sautantrika, that the phenomena, the external objects, do exist by way of their own character, whereas Chandakirti does not. So, again, I was saying he thought that he should give an explanation kind of briefly of these four different paradigms, the Vaibhashika, Sautantrika, Chittamatra, and mind only.
도체 다든다 인다 디가수 다 체라마 도데 바케지 된소와 체라 디치도 다 죽대 거디 롭지지마 당에 전소 당내 전한들로 가스는다 낭베 죽다 마와들라 낭바 산제바스 니 에바지네로 다 낭베 죽다 마와 세데 그랬으면 타와카다기 차자시 켈렘베 되니 딘드베 강사들라 죽다 마와 슬라와 낭베 죽다 마와스는 딘지 되지 담제 미다바 사제 담제 동아와 춘담제 동시 담에 봐 양을 대비 시와스 딘데지기 켈링게 아니 낭바들라 낭베 죽다 마와스 다 낭베 죽다 마와스 죽다들라 타와카다기 차자시 지용의 지바치 다 민다와 가르쳐서는 다 디니마 강사 담에 세계지 시엔들과 강사 담에 당 추기 담에 깨지 시엔들 다 강사 담에 좀 켈리 추기 담에 켈만이 비차네 아니 대범memb이 죽다 멤버스 대부 중우다 로자 중중 와다 강사 담에게 따와마도 지기 추기 담에게 따와 때라 베게 멤버빙이 죽다 아니 지 제라마와다 도디비 죽다 디체 다 강사게 담에다 추기 담에 니가 따와 때라 박인데 아니 심자바다 우마비 죽다 스테이징이 죽다스 근데 니 예발려 다 제라마와 디양 아니 갈스나 고랑기 따와디 갈스나 다 된다디 따와가다시 켈마 대된도 투문 받아 갈스나 치드 켈리 랑르 케메네스 시바 남메레스 로와 시바 남제 마레스 나고 랑르 무슨 세저로와 엄병 무슨 이게 무슨 아니 나중 장르 무슨 신의 장르 무슨 케멜이 다른 무슨 신은 지금 야가와 케로 남바 시바 그래서 시바가 남메시 했으니 뒤에서 장르 케멜이 아니 두제 참여사 비 라바 치들 제수 두바 케리 비차니 제라마 왔다 제라마 왔을 때 가서는 민디 제라마 왔을 민디 가서는 뒤숨 제기 제라도 뭐 뒤숨 제수 두바 야나 제라 시주 치모스니르와 아니 자주미 제조기 제라 시주 치모스죠 뒤 제수 당에 아니 고조게 따와디마 때라파미 어디인서 아니 제라마 왔어 다 도데바세데 야 딜테즈지 가서는 치든 켈라마 마세 장리야 켈링게 오다 팀밍이 두다면 되니 강사들아 도데바스 다 뒤따와디 가서는 오늘 치드 참여서 베라비 치든 제수 두바 마세 아니 장리 무스면 요래 스니 켈링 바이서 아니 도데바스 다 제라마와 능세들아 아니 실리고와 다 제라마와 된다 그랑 따위 전에 에와 지고 말다 주비 전이로와 아니 베너지 폐집이 되와 베너 자주마 담 아니 유승우 지수 담은 전에 폐집이 되와 망복구비 되와 아니 내대비 되와 아니 유바마비 되바스니 되바시 낭세기 되니 에와시 낭로라 되니 디레레라파 에와진 되바 줍게 신체라모 에와 되네샤와 도데발라 리비 지수 담은 도데바지다 롱구 지수 담은 도데바스니 다 도르수드는 체라모와도 도데바니디 아니 강사 담에 좀 켈레지 추기 담에 켈메나마 인자 팅미기 부담아와 소도 딘데시 딘데기 남샤지 제고레스.
So to start with a little bit of review of those four paradigms, just to remind everybody about them. And again, these are just for the note for the terminology in English. Sometimes they're called tenet systems. I'm just calling them paradigm since it kind of matches up in meaning closer to the term paradigm. So the four paradigms include the Vaibhashika, Swatantrika, Chittamadra, and Madhyamika. I'll give the English, sometimes the English terms are used, but I'll just say them once and then refer to them with the Sanskrit. So that would be the Great Exposition School, the Sutra School, the Mind-Only School, and the Middle Way School. And so the first of all, we have the basic distinction between all these four is into two different, first of all, sorry, so the basic similarity with them is that these are all Buddhist philosophical systems. They're all Buddhist paradigms. So what does that mean for Buddhist philosophy to become a Buddhist philosophy? What does it have to satisfy is that it has to be someone, the person who accepts it has to be someone who accepts the four views, which are the great seals of the four seals. I think they're often just called the four seals in English. So the four seals, which are, the four seals of philosophy, you could say. The four seals of philosophy are that all compounded phenomena are impermanent, one. Number two, all contaminated phenomena are suffering. Number three, all phenomena are selfless and empty. And number four, nirvana is peace. So those are the four seals of philosophy for a Buddhist philosopher. And what's different is then when you go and look at their perspectives on emptiness or selflessness, or I should say really selflessness, some of them accept both selflessness of persons as well as selflessness of phenomena, whereas others only accept selflessness of persons. So the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika both only accept selflessness of persons, but not selflessness of phenomena. So they're referred to as Hinayana paradigms. Now, Hinayana really literally means a small vehicle paradigm and or lesser vehicle, lower, smaller, lesser. And the reason for that, labeling them that, is because they're the scope of their thinking is smaller, less broad, because they only accept the selflessness of persons. So it's a reference to their scope of their thinking, or the scope of their view, as being lesser than the great vehicles systems. So that's again the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika. And what's the difference between those two? So a Vaibhashika is someone who, accepts that there's they accept that external phenomena exist as, objects composed out of these partless atoms or point particles, and that coarse phenomena, their coarse objects are composed of these partless atoms. And they also do not accept that there is self-cognition. So here they, self-cognition, the reason for not accepting that is because they do not accept that consciousness has, what we could say is aspected. They do not accept that consciousness sort of is, kind of contains the aspects of mental representations. I mean, I'm not sure, again, the best phrase, but just anyway, aspect is kind of a common way of translating this term. So they do not accept that consciousness is aspected, whereas because if you accepted that consciousness is aspected, then you would accept the self-cognition. Or maybe that's not the right way to say it, actually. But again, any sheba name killing nam j killing sona any wrongly killing progress labor.
What you take it as Mari Kui Sheba Nami Kel Wainzang, Rangri Kel Millibu in Tila Tuaris. Namji Kel in a Rangri Killing was a woman.
Less. So it's sorry. So it's not that. Okay. So the last thing I said, right? It's not true. It's not that they would have to accept self-cognition if they accepted that consciousness is aspected. That's not the case. It's simply that their particular way of understanding why consciousness is not aspected comes down to the fact that they don't accept the self-cognition. But it's not like you'd have to accept self-cognition if you, yeah. So that's just for them. They don't accept self-cognition. They don't accept consciousness as aspected, but they do accept these external objects. They also are, so then why are they called the Vaibhashika? Well, it's actually another English. I know I said the Great Exposition School when I said the translation in English. Sometimes it's also called the particularists. And so so the particularists referring to here that the three times are particulars which each substantially exist. That would be a kind of an explanation of their name. Another way of explaining their name is like in the Great Expositions. If you say the Great Exposition School, is because there's a text called the Ocean of Great Exposition, and they are followers of that text. So the next school is the Sautrantika, the other Hinayana paradigm. And the Sautrantika, they're different because they also accept external objects as being composed of partless atoms, but they also accept the existence of directly perceiving self-cognition, of self-cognizers. So that's the Sautrantika. Now the Vaibhashika also have different subdivisions within it, and it's not in terms of difference of view, but in terms more of their sort of practices. A little bit of difference in practice. So you have the Dharma-Guptaka school. You have the I'm forgetting the English terms. Kila usung ani garisa jedamawagi desin shisana usung deba ani neden deba
Mambo
deba ani. So we have the Dharma-Guptaka school, the Mongorwe school. I'm not sure the Sanskrit name, but I think it's something like that. I think it's like something like Mongorwa or some, I forget the Sanskrit name. So you have a second one called Mongorwa in Tibetan, and then you have the Theravada is actually one of these, and then you have the Mula Sarvastivada, So those are the four main ones, and then you have further subdivisions into 18 different branches of the Vaibhashika. And then within the Sautrantika, you have two. You have those who are followers of reasoning, and those who are followers of scripture.
dice, da tekpa chimi dhubda la sim zambi dhubda da umabi dhubda nyi shungwa che damji simbi dangni zambi dhubba chiri zambi dhubba dui zambi me da gangsa dame da chugi dame isi chugi dame di ani sim zambi kapsu chiri tungi tongwa chiri tungi ma dhubba ti chugi dame diri suda suzimi sima zeshingi tongwa loma dhigwa chiri tungi ma dhubba da tongni tindeji moto tela pagwa ma umabi kapsu 아니 덴바드비 동위 동니지 때라바고라 인두선이 심자마다 우모바 니가 동관이 추기 담에 체는 바 찍바래데 이나양 아니 체를 좀 미터가 차와레스 인두선에 다 우마베기 다 심자미 되바디 깡네 와 심자미 덴바드바 요스 와 아니 시원유도 덴바드 군다 덴바 마투스 왔다 우마베 신디네 군다 덴바 마투마스 최던데 덴바드바 말해 스네보다 디지들 다 둔다도도 심자미 두다디 콜로 타말을 쳐와레 우마비드다디 콜로 바발 저와리 아니 제라 모아다 도대바디 콜로 담을 값수 다 도르수드는 좀 된데기 최마 수에디 뒤제기 삼바다 튀바 수마인자 아니 온보 띠볼라 온보 멤버 그런 교알아이나 제라 모아다 도대비드다디 방림체 온보 녀발라드니 인심자마다 우마비드다 디나네다 콜로 바바디 아니 배지 아주 좀 된데기 최기다 수송이 풀도 중화데 콜로 바바디 인스고로 와디 값수 디체도 주제데 온보 신도는 보인자 아니 우마비드니 따와디 티니마 오다 독스미 초단디 디레모도 지기 그 좀nen데기 니른신이 숨마게 말했어 좀nen데기 최마 손이 니 간사 소소소 아니 로라 참베드니 두다가 되니스니 봐 예와디 도순 중화레스 뉴스에다 좀nen데 신라 펜네드니 아니 다 SM 잡아도 우마비 따와디 마 냠니 아니 라야야 쇠바 치게디 아니 우마비 따와 쇠바 치게 고물루 아니 디제라드니 셈셈에 따와야 수요 제바징이 가바 통에 펜니 딘데기 통에더니 오마비 따와디 아니 야두스니 탈베징이 다 좀nen데게 오마비 따와다 셈셈에 따와 순서디 장주 세발라 조와 장주 세발라 수 팅메게 디니 두다 제라모디 도데바디 닌도기 데발라 닌도기 지기나 수능상 아니 티바멘비 두다다 티바 침비 두다스 에와 제디 아니 강사 고객이 루이 아니 오보 치중의 돈이 들스 에와 제인사레스 인두산이다 두다 시기 중 지나 딘데도 두스 맞고레스
Then we have the two paradigms of the Mahayana paradigms, and these two are the Madhyamaka and the Chittamatra. And so here we have the Chittamatra, who in the Madhyamaka, they both accept that they accept the selflessness of phenomena, which is also termed emptiness. So these two schools accept emptiness, but they accept it in a different way. So the way that the Chittamatra assert selflessness of phenomena or emptiness is they assert it to be the emptiness of a different substance between the apprehender and apprehended, or so between, for instance, a valid cognizer that is realizing form and the form itself. They assert that the lack of a distinct substance between those two, between apprehended and apprehender, is emptiness. Another way of saying this is the lack of establishment of external objects. So external objects not being established is the meaning of emptiness. Another way of saying the meaning of emptiness. So this is the Chittamatra. And so for the Chittamatra, they accept that that there's these three natures: the thoroughly established nature, the other dependent nature, and the imputed nature. So they assert that the imputed natures do not truly exist, but that the thoroughly established nature and the other dependent nature do truly exist. They truly exist. So then the Madhyamaka, their view of emptiness, of selflessness of phenomena, is that all phenomena do not truly exist. All phenomena are not truly established. So that's the Madhyamaka take on emptiness. But they both assert emptiness, just in a different way. So those are the two Mahayana paradigms or tenets. And so the Buddha taught the Madhyamaka during the middle turning of the wheel of Dharma, and he taught the Chittamatra during the final turning of the wheel of Dharma, and he taught the two Hinayana paradigms, Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, during the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And he taught them to disciples of differing capacities, who had faculties of different, strengths of faculty or different, I think it's a little bit weak to use the translation just intelligence, because it's the term really in Tibetan refers to a much more broad spectrum of sort of mental abilities or mental qualities, but basically, so faculty is used for that reason. But it, so just to explain though that it's referring to many different kinds of mental capacities. So but for disciples of different faculties, he taught these different views, this different perspectives. So it wasn't that he taught the same thing all the time. He didn't teach only one view all the time. He taught depending on the disciple that was before him. And so then, you had the Buddha's teaching decline of the two Mahayana paradigms decline after the Buddha's passing. And so then you had these two people who resuscitated the Madhyamaka as well as the Chittamatra. And so the one who rejuvenated the Madhyamaka is the guardian Nagarjuna, and he is the trailblazer is the term that's used. He's the trailblazer for the Madhyamaka, and the trailblazer for the Chittamatra is the master Aryadeva. Sorry, it's not Aryadeva. the noble Arya Asanga. The noble Arya Asanga. So that's the Chittamatra trailblazer. So then we look at the Buddha and can kind of the Buddhist way of teaching to different disciples, and we can say in general that you have the Mahayana paradigms were taught to the bodhisattvas, to his disciples who were bodhisattvas, and in general the two Hinayana paradigms were taught for those who are of the disposition of the hearer vehicle, the hearer practitioners, which is also called the what is it called? I forget the Sanskrit word right now. So, but they're the hearers. So,
어떤 데 가는 데 지가야 하서는 다든다 우마비 나나야 다 든다디 가스나 바바 토메 고는 우마바리데 이네 마 따와텔라 파윤디 심즈베 따와텔라 밤니로와 그런 게 되죠. 슈 망치 된다지 사댕아 domnom니스니로와 어디도 그거 심즈베 되니 따와텔라 파유 슝장장 심즈베 신다 소지 세디로와 어디 바바 토메 독신 고는 게 따와디 우마 가스나 고 장심 바바 손상 공기 따와디 우마비 따와란체 그러와 돈이 웃음도 또 별로 봐봐 어딘데 인상 되는 우마비 따와체 이내 고난게 마 숭에게 되니 두다 마 숭에게 셈점이 두다 마 두순수 대한 콩두사데 지수 참바공비야 슝라 콩두니로와 는 지수 참바공비고 슝 참조 땡가 나니 아니 가리 도대게다 우단남진이라 콩두니 아니 마 셈점이 되는 템비스디 따와데야 수체와레스 일단 지수 전부 공부하게 되니 운동제도 줄라마디 우마비 되니 남기신 바송네 도르스도는 좀 년대기 순교기 되니 콜로 파비기 외된 돈이기 좀 바디 마사와 등에디 아니 지 공부를 주니 마주와치 배드 운동기 좀 바디 남기신 바디 마사와 되어디 지수 전부 공부 파파 통면 외인 권이 마도 순교바 인상 다 가정도 슝마 룽장인데 가정이지만 좀 지처나 가스나 우단남제도 도되게 룽 장용도 파파 통면이 있어요. 아니 군주당 대두도 룽 장용도 와 어디 된다 되니만 따와텔라 봐요인데 다 코나도 슝 장에 장만 다 고무를 주고 슝 되니만 로베 선제잖아 받는다 와도 룽 장장 콩장이 어디 따위 값수다 코나도 슝 고무를 주니 마 사무 남기지 바디 고무를 주니 마지 자치를 남기지 바디 파파 통면이 마지 주셔봐 공문이 파파 통면 어둑스 마드와 인상 다든다 데 우마비 고 제시 망보 유용 거데 고무를 주고 있더니 돈이게 따와 텔라페 제수 되니 고무를 주고 슝 우마를 쏘주는 우마 자와셔라 제와 제게 우마 턴주비 체베 제시 잡으래 우마 랑주비 체베 제시 잡으래 뒤인데 다 관계택이래 관계택이 말했으니 다 뒤에 따와디 다 고무를 주고 있더니 슝디마 우마 자와셔라기 공간적인 제와디라 제와 제를 뒤나니다 우마 탄주비 개박이 루베 산제전다 빠낸다 와쳐박이 제를 루벨린데지게 제를 뒤인데서니다 우마랑 주바다 탄주비 니가게 동반이게 따와디 숭고어데 숭당 민다와 인상다 랑루 다 따와 남다디 가르치고래서 하고 와라 다 무슨 게 가능한데 이마 하고 해지도 어디니마 고무루루비 제나게 우마비 개번도 마도 좀 송이 분센데 어디 돼 인사래스.
So we have again these different scholars who revive those traditions and those philosophical schools, and so the Arya Asanga was actually, even though he was the trailblazer for the Chittamatra system, he himself was actually Madhyamaka. So his own view was as a Madhyamaka, even though he clarified and laid out decisively laid out the Chittamatra view through his 5 texts of the grounds. Gonna Pabatome Zebe Sadengadang Shanda Digare
Domnamni.
Domnamni, right. And so then the 2 texts of the compendium of Mahayana and the compendium of the Abhidharma. So those are the the text of Asanga, those 7 texts, the 5 texts on the grounds, and then these 2, the compendium of Madhyamaka and the compendium of the Abhidharma, and which is called the Abhidharma Samuccaya. And then so we know that he was actually, even though all of those texts, they actually explain the Chittamatra view, we know he was actually a Madhyamaka because he's an Arya Bodhisattva. So an Arya Bodhisattva is a being, a person who has directly perceived emptiness, and since he's directly perceived emptiness, he must hold the Madhyamaka view. And so he also, when he composed those texts, he did it on the basis of the text of Maitreya, of the great Maitreya. And so Maitreya also has those texts, the 5 texts of Maitreya, as they're called, the 5 treatises of Maitreya, and those were quoted extensively in the earlier sections of this Lamrim, of the Lamrim text, especially in just the previous chapters and on serenity. And so again, the Jamshung Nalola Umabe Shungnire Umagen Dan Gundogen Gulama Gundogen. So then the out of the 5 texts of Maitreya, 2 of them are from the perspective of, or 2 of them express the Madhyamaka school, the other 3 express the Chittamatra. So the 2 that teach the Mahayana Paradigms view is the what's called the Treatise on, sometimes it's called the Treatise on Buddha Nature, but that's, I think, the English text is published. The title of the English book is Buddha Nature. And so then the one that's called Buddha Nature is really called the it's called the Gyu Lama, what is it called, the Uttara Tantra, okay, so that's the Uttara Tantra, and then the ornament of clear realizations, or the Abhisamalamkara. Those 2 teach the Madhyamaka, and the other 3 teach the Chittamatra view. So we have now these, even though those texts were very extensively quoted, and right here in by Tsongkhapa, they're not quoted in reference to the view, in reference to establishing the view, because when we establish the view, which is the profound stages of the path, then Tsongkhapa quotes from Nagarjuna. He always references Nagarjuna, not the text of Asanga and Maitreya. So he only quoted the text of Asanga and Maitreya in terms of presenting the vast stages of the path, the extensive stages of the path. So those are the 2, there's 2 different, right, kind of sets of teachings: the vast stages of the path, and then the profound stages of the path. So when the profound ones are where it's establishing the correct view, and for those Tsongkhapa quotes and relies upon Nagarjuna. And so the reason, for kind of the section of the text here is because we, want to see how Nagarjuna, he composed the I'm sorry, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the treatise on wisdom, the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and there are 8 commentaries, eight great commentaries written on that. And so Sankaba here is sort of laying out who were those commentators and which, what are their different views and which ones kind of have more, are more tenable than the other ones. So that's why we have this sort of history of the commentary on Nagarjuna's text. That's all. So we're starting to run out of time. So if there are some questions, then please let's take the questions, and I'll do that now. Oh, thank you. Someone has posted in the chat box, if you are online, a PDF with the tenets, sort of. I'm not sure exactly what's in there, but the tenets meaning, again, these different philosophical paradigms. So please download that if you are on Zoom.
I believe that was prepared several years ago when Geshe Darge was presenting the tenet systems. And I don't know about its accuracy, but it was helpful for me to follow along as you were describing different.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, so this is just actually one table. So that would be very good. It gives the distinction, the divisions of those different schools. Yeah.
I have a question. You talked when you were talking about the Vibhashika, you mentioned that they do not accept self-cognition, and then you talked about consciousness is not aspected. That term was unfamiliar to me. Is that possible to explain what that means?
Jedamawagi Shepandamiris Kelangi years ani di tani di gomanyon, tani di tunda, tani di tunda, Tashikian Ranam, Shepandamiki tunda.
Oh, that did it. That in the Sheba de la Roi, Zinam dang Sunam Sin Nishagor, that Jidang to the Kumaina, to the Banchi, that's Sui Namba, Ruat Lola, that Shebi. yu sungwi namba jidang, yu jin lui namba nisha warwa. Da jinda rang, yu jin lui namba di, ani kogi yewa jigo mara, yu jin lui namba me, yu ki namba jangyang, namba teba re, chirama yarwa. Yundu zani sheba nami, seki nami di, kasana lola, ani sungwi namba dang, zimbi namba nigi yewa shaya digma re, korangi ta di de wenzang, ani sheba nami se gyunze, o tinde jitoni deshi jagido us. Tinzanda Geshe 아니 랑리 켈레만은 진음 야가 와서 진빈 넘버지 그러와 시바 코랑 용이 차지샤고 어디 용이 차디 아니 그 켈링고 말 코랑이 가서는 시바 코랑이 아니 유그 또그 넘버 때비 또그 넘버 뭐 유진기 또그 넘버 때바 말해 tinde지 군생 장이 아니 시바 남에서 군생 tinde지 샤고도
지금 짐바 양가와서나 용의 넘버 잡아 차기라. 짐바 양가와 디 용의 넘버래. 셰버 랑 토끼 용의 넘버. So then the Vaibhashika here don't accept this this notion of consciousness being aspected, and if you look at more broadly at the Buddhist philosophy, then there's a distinction between the apprehender aspect and the apprehended aspect, or the aspect of the apprehender, the aspect of the apprehended. The apprehended here is, so this here is referring to a distinction between subject and object. So here, the aspect of an object which is apprehended is the aspect of the apprehended, whereas the aspect of the subject itself is the aspect of the apprehender, or the apprehender aspect. So when you have the Vaibhashika's stance that consciousness is not aspected, it's that what they're saying is that a perception of an object only contains the object's aspect itself. So object's aspect is the only thing that occurs, or that is part of the process of perception. The when the way that an object is apprehended in a mind, so the consciousness there, the mind there, only bears the aspect of that apprehended object. Whereas other schools accept that also there is a consciousness itself, mind itself has it by its own power, its own aspect of experience, sort of an experiencer aspect, which is sort of just the apprehender, the Ngawang. It's like solely the apprehender, sort of a segment. Yeah, I'm not sure the best translation, but Ngawang is like it's alone. That's what alone. So it's the apprehender alone. That's what other schools assert. So if you accept that there is this aspect of, if you accepted that there was this, that there is this aspect alone of consciousness, then you would come to accept that there is self-cognition. So yeah, that's all. What is the Tibetan term used for aspected? Is namche. Shepa namche is aspected consciousness, and shepa namme is consciousness with that's non-aspected. So namba is this word which is extremely extensively used in many different contexts, and so it's a very powerful and broad term. And here in English we have the word aspect to translate it, which I know is a kind of unusual term in English, so it's maybe not the best, but I honestly don't know a better one. So more questions? So it seems like there aren't any other questions.
I could ask a question. There's a phrase, certain knowledge of emptiness. And other places we talked about experiencing emptiness. Is there a distinction to be made there? And is there a test of the certain knowledge of emptiness?
Test of it, like for oneself to see if you have it or not.
No, yeah, or even yes, yeah. So yes, I'll say that, right? Because it's for the self to decide that, right?
And again, Tombani, like Geshe, definite knowledge, Tombani ngebadang Tombani Ngawang ni kepa yerebes, ani Tombani ngema ngegi ewa jetang taktachi yerebes, so gula Tombani ngebe temachi ke keba yudam mes tachi kandes chebores.
원래 다든다 디 동반이 녀바다 용화스니 가스나 고 유기 넘바 인상 셰바이나 고 용스 롱을 깨니 세저라 디 요르와 다고 유기 차 인상 녀바다 용화 로가 매바체 녀바 다가라 용화 디기지 동바 다가라와 다디 또비 단디 돈이 또마도 그 세지 가는 것은 다 돈이 또발라 때네 돈이 다 돈이 수도 다 데모 매바 돈을 로지스 거와 다 데마 두바즈미 덴징 데마즈바디 덴징기 누바디 충두르고나 셈나라와 데마즈바 덴징저와 데마즈미 덴징디 누바 충두르와 야나 덴징기 치더라 수만나시 민두 삼벨로기 녀바 덴바이나 아니 동반이 또 바레스 다 데데 동반이 또 선제 강사들라 다 가서는 진다디 반네다 와처 디송어와 아니 가서는 동반이게 땀 줘봐나 민네 치마 줘봐도 눈이 바보요하게 딘데게 따다는 되는 거지. 와 동반이게 깨지 시는데 와 된다디 우마 줘봐나 디 송로와 소소 쭈르트나 동반이도 나도 랍도 가와양다 랍도 가와리 좀 민네 치마 류기 바보 당화 줘봐 대라 조배 산제로에 사베 소 딘데스 송가와 뭐 자스지 뭐 시발이장 동니디 단 또에다 파샤 태좀 사왔음지 자더니 당진 차소님 뭐 중도로 그래서 다 소소그 주게 차소님 뭐 받다 당진 근데 왜다 누모도 충도 주고에나 다 돈이 고안입이 다직 된는 거 디마서 돈이 막 제시 잡용도 랑싱게 라와메 범민의 치마 주변에 바부유에게 딘데게 있으면 남라빈 리고 어 딘데레면은 아니 동반이 또 말했어 마도 지기 동반이 막 제시 잡았던 거 봐. 말했어我听这些，他那熊呢，那些送了，其当时你地过了，东你多嘛多，看这些东你都会采上的地干嘛活了，但是好多呢，结果修听用这些事，其他说不清的这些事。
So, yes, when you talk about in sort of broadly, sometimes there could be a difference between having definite knowledge, also it's called ascertainment sometimes, versus having experience of something. Like when you're just talking about the mind itself having experience, it's not necessarily definite knowledge. But here, since we're talking about an object that's known, something, the aspect of an object being known, then the ascertainment or the definite knowledge is the same. It's that is exactly what is meant by the experience of it. It's the definite knowledge of it. So here, what does it then mean? Like, how do you test whether or not you have realized it? If you have the realization of emptiness, what is the sort of demarcation of having realized emptiness? So again, here, realizing emptiness means realizing the that there is no truth, right? That there's no true existence. So realizing emptiness means realizing non-existence of truth. And so then when you realize right, so then there's kind of two different signs that we can look to determine if this realization has arisen. And there's internally what happens within your own mind, and then externally there are signs that are sort of physical manifestations of that realization. And so internally, it's when you see that the truth grasping, which grasps at truth, is diminishing. When you see that is weakened, that's a sign, an internal sign of having realized emptiness, definite knowledge of emptiness. And then likewise, when you have the understanding or the thought arise in your mind, there's nothing truly established. There is no true establishment. And you have that understanding when that's clear in your mind. That's a sign of having realized or having this definite knowledge of emptiness. And likewise, you have the external signs, which are mentioned by Chandrakirti in the his text Entering the Middle Way, where, and I don't know the exact verses by heart, but he explains that, you have sort of uncontrollably tears coming from your eyes, and your hair, your body hairs rise. You get goosebumps. Basically, you get goosebumps and your hairs rise, and you have tears coming from your eyes. Then when you explain or hear about emptiness, then that's a sign that you have a strong disposition for emptiness or a realization of it. And so it's not just just being able to explain emptiness is not a sign that you've realized it. That alone is not a sign that a person's realized emptiness, but having these kind of reaction when they talk about emptiness, when they explain it, that is a sign that the view of emptiness is there, that the definite knowledge is there. And then you also have Aryadeva, Master Aryadeva, explained in his text that even just having some kind of questioning of this true existence and emptiness, questioning that, or doubting whether or not things are really truly existent and whether or not they're empty, that itself will help to reduce and lower the power of your afflictions and the three poisons. And again, this kind of truth grasping. And again, the papalagi tetsamsangi
나와 썸이죠.
Ngawang
시바요스. 시럽
Chiba
충을
Chiba.
태준사입니다. 미직박 공부 두분 주기 내라고 뒤에 어느 또에 파시 도바지에서 통모르스. 도바 사와 썸기잖아. 되니베 그래서 코알라 칭의 균이 모디베 충도 그랬는데
Yeah. So then, right. So like someone who's kind of got, who is faculty, again, using this word, faculties are weaker, they wouldn't even ever give rise to any questioning or any doubting of, whether or not phenomena truly exist. So even just having the mere questioning, starting to question that itself will start to shake the foundations of samsara, the root of samsara, and will start to reduce the power of one's afflictions and truth grasping.
Thank you. I would just follow up and say, ask to what extent is the concept of emptiness intended to smash the dualistic mind, or just, to take that and, put it aside and, not rely on it so strongly.
Okay. So also, again, I said that this, much more about this question will come in the text below about, how to tell, what does it mean to realize emptiness, and how to tell that's happened and so forth. So what do you mean by a dualistic mind, though? Is that something you could clarify?
Yeah, so basically a mind where the concepts used are always one in opposition to another, where one is dependent on another. So it's really almost conceptual mind itself. If you talk about,
I could ask,
we're using logical proofs. And logical proofs are very much dependent on negation, right? So there's this, duality. It exists, it doesn't exist.
That's all. And again, the Tony Gomba Digi that's all Topa. Tochi low, right? Topa number Topa Karang Jomba Jebe Chedus, Tombani Komia Yoribis, Tombani Gombe Gubadi, and so Topa that's all.
남도
Maybe so you Namto Sana Sogomani Topa Koseg Topa Sana Chigi Karisore
또바도 또미스 또바들어봐.
Topa didn't answer again. Topa Tomegi Topa answer. Perna Chig Yedong May somebody Yedong May Nibit Topa.
또바들.
Yobadong Mayba Nibit Topa that's all maybe so you get the don't come here your best.
다 돈이데 고말라 때네 아니 차소 유무바 중도 줘야기 建가서 차소 유무바 용단 도바 된다데 태좀 딘조 강가 용사디 자와 당진을 되는 거와 당진디 기디니 제대로 숨었다도 민두 삼바디 하고는 돈이 다그 돈이 공도 되리지 삼은 당고래와 덴바 주원 나양 덴바 마주비 장신스 최든지 어 딘데기 덴바 주원 수수 능라도 나와라 덴바 주원 나와 뭐 첨부요 이래 팀민도 섬 곰 딘데기 지바치니 아니 지바신도야 줘야라면도 돈이 도스들라부터 가다 셈나 가서는 그 뭐바 이제 수도야 돈이 고안인데 신이 딘데치고데 동마 퇴비 돈이 좀 미수납기 때문에 퇴중이 시럽게 퇴중이 시럽잖아 삼중이 시럽 되니 신이 고메 그제를 거와 다 돈이 고메는데 다 등하나서 퇴지 뭐바 이제 수도 고마 있는 딘데지기 다 가더라 도바들 암산 세트인데 있는 람티세기 귤라도 그래서 어떤 뜻이야.
So we talk about meditating on emptiness, and I didn't say the concept of emptiness just because I don't really know a way to say that in Tibetan, but just we don't talk about concepts for some reason. That's just a note. But so meditation on emptiness is really for the purpose of reducing and overcoming the afflictions and the three poisons. So you see that the three poisons of attachment, anger, and ignorance or delusion. And so you see that all when it comes down to it, all these different afflictions they arise from self-grasping. And so you have to counteract that self-grasping. Then we have to realize that even though things appear to be truly existent, appear to be real, they are not real, they are not true. And so you have this, so that's how we should think about the concept of emptiness. It's something to help us overcome this particular conception, these wrong conceptions that grasps things to be true where they are not true. So they appear to be true, but they are not true. And so, or appear to be real, but are not real. So this is the purpose of emptiness. And so then when we talk about, really using it to do that, first you have the wisdom arising from learning or hearing, where you study these texts that we've been referring to, and you gain this basic understanding. And you, at first, you have a sort of, you go by the, you practice on the basis of your sort of belief and sort of almost imagination that, okay, you have this basic sense of emptiness, so basic you have a sense of it that you can use to practice, and you learn more, and you go to the second stage of the wisdom arisen from contemplation, and you then gain this sort of ascertaining knowledge, this definitive knowledge, and only at that point then do we talk about meditation. It's only after you've already gained the definitive knowledge. So, but first, like where we are now, we just start sort of almost through imagination, that we sort of kind of have a rough understanding of emptiness, and we can still use that to meditate, and that's how the concept of emptiness is used.
Okay, thank you.
So if there are no more questions, then we'll stop here.
Geshe Geshe Mendo Zhama Rirava Lingxi Nidi Genba Di Sanje Shindu Mini Peva Zhugui Namda Shinla Cheba Sho Yedama Guru Rama Menda Laka Daya Mi Kanri Ravi Kovi Shingumansu Pendang Dewa Malu Chungmi Jere Zewang Denzin Jazu Yin Shabe Sede Bat Den Yuro Ji Gaden Duji Kamsu Chile Ju Dobjo Dabe Lungdo Jin Losaya Namla Rilaman Jemin De Lamdun Jive Shelan Sowan De Changjo Simjo Rimbo Ji Ma Je Banan Je Kewa Nyamba Meba Yang Kone Kondo Bewa Sho Tarzin Neguin Sewe Me Samu Tenje Tadang Tawe No Pajo Lujubu Yase Gomba Chishi Kondo Chebe Yuro Changjo Simjo Rimbo Je Maje Banan Ke Kewa Nyamba Meba Yang Kone Kondo Bewa Sho Gewa Di Kewu Gun Sonama Ishi Sonama Ishi Le Jungwe Tamba Guni Toba Sho. Oh, good night. Thank you. I wish you all good night.
Thank you.
Teacher Shay.